Hello, Miss Bailey's class. This is Mr. Forlenza again, here to teach you today about government foundations as it relates to power structures in government. Now, once again, just like the citizenship video that we watched before, these power structures you're going to see throughout the year as you learn governments with Europe, Latin America, Canada, and Australia, and you're even going to see them again directly next year in 7th grade social studies. Before we get started, there's a couple of vocabulary terms that we need to review as it relates to government power structures. Those two words are predominant and power. Predominant means having the most or greatest influence over other people or things. The reason why I brought the word predominant here as a vocabulary word is as I'm explaining to you the three different types of government, understanding the word predominant is going to be important as we know how to distinguish between the three of them. And then power refers to in government the ability to control or make laws and decisions for a certain area. One way to think about this is who has power in your world. Most of you probably think that you have a lot of power in the decisions and law decisions that you make for yourself on a regular basis. But in actuality, your teachers and parents also have power as well in referring to the restrictions and decisions that you have in your life. Now, here are the three types of power that you're going to see throughout the year in 6th grade social studies. You have a unitary power structure, a confederation power structure, and a federal power structure. Now, I realize that those three things, you may have heard of the word confederation and federal before, may have not heard of unitary, and they sound very confusing. Give me 1 second and I will explain the distinction between those three different types of government power structures. Okay, we're going to start first with a unitary power structure. In a unitary power structure, the central or large government body makes all of the decisions in a society. Essentially, the large government has predominant power over all small or forms of government. In fact, the unitary has exclusive power to make decisions and to make laws within those types of societies. The second type is called a confederation. Now, a confederation is almost like the reverse of a unitary. In a confederation, the small government bodies distribute power evenly and collectively make decisions. Basically, the small government bodies have predominant power over a very, very weak central large government body, which means all of the decisions that come down from the top, the large government, started at the smaller bodies first, and then they came up with a collective decision, and then the larger government body just kind of carries it out. Now, the third one, federal, is kind of like a combination between unitary and confederation. Think of it like the two of them blended. Basically, the central large government body and the small government bodies share the ability to make decisions. So there's checks and balances between the large government bodies and the small government bodies in order to make decisions for the particular region, country, or area. An analogy is to think about managing or the decisions of a sports team. Basically, when you think of a sports team, you have your central large government body. Let's call him the coach of the sports team. And then you have your smaller government bodies. Let's call those the players. In a unitary system, the coach would be making all of the decisions. He would be making the decisions about who plays, he would be making the decisions about what plays are run, and he would be making all of the decisions about what goes on in practice. Most sports teams have a unitary type of power structure in that the coach makes the decisions for what the smaller government bodies, the players, do in regards to the games and practices. Now, some teams rarely have a confederation type of power structure. That basically means that there's not really a coach, or if there is one, he's not making a lot of the decisions, but rather the team comes up with their strategy for their game plan. They come up with how they're going, what kind of plays they're going to run, and they come up with deciding who's going to play at certain points in the game. So a confederation basically is the players making all of the decisions about what goes on during the game. Now, a good combination would be a federal power structure. This would be the coaches and the players talking about the types of decisions that they want to make for their sports teams. Think of the federal as kind of like a compromise between unitary and confederation. Now, we're going to look again at some examples just like we did under citizenship. Let's take a look at the first example. The first example says, during the 1930s and 1940s, Adolf Hitler's Reichstag controlled all domestic, international, and military operations within the German Empire without delegating authority to local or state-based governments. Just like we did in citizenship, we want to take a look at some key words. So we have Reichstag controlled all. We have without delegating authority to local or state-based governments. So when we look at this, we know that the state and the local have what? They really have no power. And that the Reichstag, Hitler's Reichstag, holds almost all of the power. So what kind of power structure do you think this would be? If you said unitary, you would be correct. And here's the reason why it would be a unitary power structure. The central government body possessed all of the power within the society, while the local governments had little to no involvement at all. In fact, the central government was controlling everything, just like exists under a unitary power structure. Let's look at the second example. It says, in the Cherokee Nation, each tribe sent an individual chief to a periodic summit to help make decisions for the collective whole. The chiefs would then return to their individual tribes with the consensus of the group. Okay, so a couple of keywords to take note of here. We've got each tribe, an individual chief, periodic summit. So what this means, if the summit was periodic, it means like they had a meeting, but it wasn't all the time. It only happened sometimes. Okay, make decisions for the collective whole, and then there was a consensus. A consensus means like an agreement that all of the smaller chiefs agreed upon. So which type of power structure do you think example 2 would be? If you said confederation, you would be correct. Here's the rationale why this is a confederation type of power structure. Basically, the collective individual chiefs represent each small tribe, a small government body that meet on an infrequent basis to make decisions for the whole group. No central government power truly exists. Yes, they met with a large government body at this summit, but the summit only met as a result of each individuals deciding to meet for their smaller tribes. So even though they met as a large government body, it was really the decisions of all the smaller chiefs that were making the decisions for the whole group. Let's look at example number 3. It says, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, East and West Germany reunified into the Germany we know today, where the national government, state, and local governments share duties and responsibilities through checks and balances. Okay, the key with this one is obviously share duties and responsibilities between governments that are state, local, and national. So what type of power structure do you think this would have been? If you said federal, you would be correct. And here's the reason why. The key with the federal power structure is checks and balances within smaller government bodies and the central government. A distribution of power is key with the federal power structure. Also, the unique thing about example number 3 is it's the same example as example number 1 with Nazi Germany. It's important to understand that a lot of the times countries go through different periods of power structures. While Germany may have been unitary at one time, they are now a federal power structure. So it's important to understand that not all countries stay the same throughout their history. Something to think about as we end this discussion is what type of power structure exists here in the United States. Think about whether we have the small governments making all the decisions, the large government in Washington, D.C. making the decisions for everybody else, or do the states and the national governments share powers and responsibilities? Think about that topic as you move on to the assessment questions after this video.